Nadat mijn hoogbegaafde zoon met schooltrauma was uitgevallen op het basisonderwijs en hierdoor een van de duizenden thuiszitters werd die Nederland rijk is, verslond ik alles wat ik over hoogbegaafdheid kon vinden. Want hoewel hoogbegaafdheid heel veel mooie kanten kent, kunnen onze kinderen het toch soms knap lastig hebben. Uiteindelijk besloten wij als gezin dat wij de kennis en ervaringen die wij hadden opgedaan wilden delen met andere ouders en leerkrachten, zodat de reis voor hen iets makkelijker zou worden. We doen dit via het boek Een Intense Reis, maar ook via deze podcast, waarin deskundigen op het gebied van begaafdheid hun kennis delen, want samen komen we verder. Dit is Een Intense Reis, de podcast, en mijn naam is Marije Hofland. Hi everyone, today's episode will be in English because I have a very special guest all the way from Oregon, USA. And this is very special to me because in my book I wrote that my son's journey is also my own journey. And today's guest was really a big part of that journey. When my son was not in school anymore and we found out that his behavior was because of his giftedness in regard to trauma as well, I read a lot of books about giftedness because I wanted to know everything I possibly could so I could help him embrace his gift, accept who he is, basically. And I remember when he was in therapy and I asked one of the people who was treating him whether there were any other books that I should read. And she said, well, there is this one book that you should read, and I think you will recognize some things of yourself, and that will be good, because if you accept who you are, it will be so much easier for your son to accept himself as well. And that book was Your Rainforest Mind, and my guest today is the author of that amazing book, Paula Prober. Paula is a psychotherapist, consultant, blogger, and author in private practice in Eugene, Oregon, USA. She has over 35 years of experience working with gifted people, and you can visit her amazing blog at rainforestmind.com. I would also advise everyone to follow Paula on Instagram because she shares the most amazing stories that truly help you embrace your gifts. And when I told one of my best friends that I was going to record this podcast with Paula, she responded, Paula radiates love. And that's exactly what she does. So thank you, Paula. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mariah. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you don't even know what it means to have you on this podcast today. So thank you so much. Yeah, like I said, over the past 2 years, there were a lot of wonderful people who came into my life because when we found out that the reason that my son was at home was because of his giftedness, I read a lot about giftedness, and because of his journey, I also got in touch with a lot of people who were also gifted, and I finally, it finally felt like I also found my tribe in a way, and I call them my butterfly people because I used to feel like I was in a cocoon, and I was not getting out there. I was, like there was a filter between me and the rest of the world. And they helped me grow and transform into my true self and escape the cocoon that basically I had created for myself. And I love how that analogy goes hand in hand with the rainforest mind, because when I visualized the rainforest, me and my husband, we visited the Amazon one day, and we were in the rainforest, and there were lots of these blue morpho butterflies there, and it was the most amazing sight. And when I envision this, I see those blue morpho butterflies thrive in the rainforest, and it all seems to just come together, like your analogy and mine. How did you come up with this?
Well, first, I love I can picture those butterflies, and I might have to add them somewhere in something that I write about, because that's so I'm sure a lot of people could relate to the butterfly as,
Yeah.
yeah, as being their process, part of their process. So I was a teacher before I became a therapist, and
Hmm.
I was teaching in a middle school with gifted children
Yeah.
in pull-out programs. That's what we had back then, at least in some of the schools. And I needed a way to explain giftedness to the teachers at that
Hmm.
time. They were very resistant. They didn't want me pulling the kids out of their classes.
Yeah.
This was years ago, but it's still
It
today,
here in
right?
the Netherlands, it's still like that. Like yesterday, I visited like some of my friends, and their child, he actually is gifted, and he used to go to this one program that just once a week they would give him like additional, more exciting work, and he would get to meet peers.
Mm.
Um, and I asked him how he was doing, and they actually said he's not going anymore because his teacher thought he was doing too well.
He was doing too well in the program, or
Yes. Yeah,
being, yeah, he was too happy.
yeah, they like they met their objectives, so there was no point in him going anymore.
Oh,
And that
oh,
just broke my heart.
yes, yes. It's it's so hard for these kids in school often. In this country, we're not, I mean, there hasn't been any progress that I've seen. Actually, I should say, I'm sure there are some schools and there are some particular teachers that know how to work with
Yeah.
these kids, but they're in general, it's a struggle. It's a
Yeah.
struggle in this, I always qualify this because especially now with COVID, the teachers have quite a lot on their plates to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I have to qualify it that way and say that I've seen over these many years that schooling for gifted children is often uninspiring and
Yeah.
difficult. And so at that time, I, I wanted to come up with a way that people could understand giftedness more than just high IQ, right?
Yeah,
Which is what they all
absolutely.
thought it was.
Hmm.
And, and so it was, I don't even remember how the thought came to me, but it was like, let's think of a metaphor. What would be a good metaphor to describe giftedness?
Yeah.
And somehow this idea popped into my head. I don't know how. It was a moment, a great moment. And to think of like people, see, this was an equitable description. See, because it's all people are like ecosystems,
Hmm.
and some are like meadows, and some are like the desert, and some are like volcanoes, and some are like the rainforest. And
Yes.
all ecosystems are beautiful and valuable. Just that the rainforest ecosystem is the most complex. And that's what we're looking at when we're looking at these children and adults.
Yeah.
They're more complicated. They're more intense. They're overwhelming. They can be um, colorful and full of life, and they can impact the planet, which of course the rainforest does. And then they can also be misunderstood and cut down, like
Yeah.
we cut down the rainforest, we burn up the rainforest, and we don't let them be what they are naturally, which we all need. And so it became a way, at least for some people, to understand, oh, this is what these children are like. This is what these adults are like. They're not better than the other people, but they are
Exactly.
just different
Yeah.
and more complicated. And it's been helpful for some teachers that are open, and also for the gifted people themselves, because many
Yes.
of them don't like like the word gifted. They don't think they're gifted, but they will come to me and they'll say, I'm not gifted, but I think I have a rainforest mind. And so it's
Yeah,
like, okay,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So that's how it started.
Yeah, I love that. I had to write a book before I could actually use the word gifted, because I would just use abbreviations and things like that, but I would never use the word gifted. And actually, um, um, one of the subjects in my book is also about that, about this. That lots of people, they don't talk about this, and And actually, I remember that there were lots of friends who were like reading my book before it came out so that they could give me feedback. And they were like, no, but Mariah, you're not even using it. And if you're not using it, why would other people start using it as well? Because even you can't just talk about it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're so right. And it sometimes it's such a progress to be able to really and truly embrace this. And I think the term rainforest mind that really that really helps. And what I also love about that is that, when I picture the rainforest, you have all those different layers. And at all those different layers of the rainforest, there's people, there's different animals and different wildlife and different plants living there. And I think I love that because, one of the things I love about my butterfly people now is that they can relate to my many layers and I can touch them on different layers like every time. So, that's another way in which your analogy, it just touches my heart. So thank you.
Oh, you're so
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah. Yeah. It's when I think too about the rainforest and you're walking into the jungle,
Yeah.
there's so much going on that you don't see. And I think that's another way to describe these people. There's, when you say the layers, there's so much to them that on the surface, if you don't get to know them deeply, you wouldn't know all of these things are happening. So that's another way to, describe these folks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're
Beautiful.
not simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I also didn't know, like I just listened to the podcast you made for with Sophia for our gifted kids, and I love that podcast. So I often recommend it to other people as well, and it's on my website as well. So just people go listen to that podcast as well because Sophia's got lots of different um, guests coming over as well, and you can learn a lot from them. But one of the things you mentioned in her podcast, which I really didn't realize, is that the rainforest minds, that it doesn't reflect like all gifted people, but like a subset of gifted people, which we in Holland, in the Netherlands, we call the creatively gifted. And actually, what we see in the Netherlands is that most of the time, those are the gifted kids that don't fit into the school system. So there's thousands of kids here in the Netherlands who don't go to school because basically the school system just doesn't fit their needs, and they actually get ill, like physically, mentally, they're just not feeling well because they have to go to school like every day, sit there for hours in an environment that just doesn't match their needs. So that made me love the rainforest mind analogy even more because it seems to like perfectly fit for those children. Yeah, could you please explain what it is that you mean by like the term creatively gifted and why it is that, this fits them so well?
Yes. Yes. So what I've learned over the years is that, there are so many different definitions of what giftedness is. And the traditional definition is the more intellectually advanced, the cognitive ability, the high IQ. And that is a gifted person. A gifted person has a high IQ. And what I noticed is some people are what we call linear sequential thinkers. Mm-hmm. They're not the creative random thinkers. They kind of do one thing at a time. They finish one thing before they do the next thing.
Yes.
And right. And they can be gifted, but they're not divergent thinkers. They don't have what a rainforest mind person has, which is this multi-potentiality, many interests and many things they can do well. and they do several projects at a time,
Yeah.
and they're highly sensitive and they have a lot of empathy. Not every intellectually, just plain old intellectually gifted person has those things. So what I felt, I didn't really emphasize it in my book, but as I've been working in the field since the book, it's gotten clearer to me that the
Yeah.
rainforest minded is just really one type, and the type that doesn't do as well in school, because schools tend to be designed for linear sequential thinkers. And
Absolutely.
I'm thinking that maybe a number of teachers tend to also be linear sequential, people who go into the field. And so they teach the way they know best, which is that style. They're not open-ended, creative as much. And so these kids suffer
Yeah.
in schools because
Yeah.
of it. So that's what I've learned over the years, that these children who are highly creative and imaginative and highly sensitive often don't fit into the model in the traditional schools.
Yeah. But when we look at traditional schools, like and in the school system, the way that we have it, is there some things that we can do, like as parents or also as teachers or counselors, that we could do
Yes.
just to make their lives easier?
Yes, for sure. I mean, back when I was in education, I would do some training of teachers, how to
Mm-hmm.
work with gifted children in the regular classroom.
Yeah.
And I would talk to them about some of these just simple things that teachers can do. There's a thing called cluster grouping, where let's say you have a third grade classroom and you have 3 teachers, because you've got a lot of kids
Mm-hmm.
in the school. You can group all the gifted children in the one classroom with the
Yes.
teacher who is the most creative, who understands giftedness the best,
Mm-hmm.
who knows how to work in, with open-ended teaching methods and project-based learning, isn't a rote learner, doesn't use worksheets. So, these are some of the things. People
Yes.
resist it because they think, oh, but every teacher needs the gifted kid in their classroom because they're fast learners, and it doesn't serve the children. It serves the teachers
Yeah.
to do that. So the cluster grouping concept is one idea.
Mm-hmm.
What this other idea, it's called compacting,
Yeah.
which is where the child doesn't have to do every single thing that all the other kids do. They don't have to have a worksheet of 30 math problems when they already know how to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
right, yeah. So there are those tools that if a classroom teacher learns, it can make a big difference for the gifted child. Just if the teacher loves the child, and isn't threatened by all of their questions and their curiosity,
Yeah.
that can make a difference too. So there are things parents can recommend, parents can learn about, um, supporting those teachers who are more creative and open-minded can be
Yeah.
helpful.
I love what you're saying, that actually just seeing a child, just giving them attention and just making sure that they know that they're appreciated, and just offering them a little bit of flexibility, that actually just makes a lot of difference as well, so that they know that there's nothing wrong with them, because they sometimes um, actually, I know that they sometimes feel like there's something wrong with them. Like, for example, um, I already told you that my son, he was experiencing a school trauma because he just didn't fit in. He felt different. He felt like he didn't belong. And he actually felt like there was something like really wrong with him. And it was really difficult for the teachers and other people to understand that as well, because they just don't understand how something like school can hurt a child to such an extent that he actually basically has a trauma response. Like he's got this really small window of tolerance, and like whatever happens, he just he can just either like all tune out or explode, or and people don't understand how something like not fitting in at school, like not belonging, like knowing that feeling like everyone is different. There's no one who's the same way as you are, basically, um, can be traumatic. And it actually made me think as well, like, is there a connection between the way that we as gifted people experience anxiety, stress, and trauma? And could it be, for example, because of our overexcitabilities, that we do experience those what other people call minor inconveniences? Like, we experience that in a stronger way. So also the effect of those things is much greater than other people. Is there a relationship between all those things?
Definitely, definitely. The people don't realize this, but that it's like the intellect is larger, but also the sensitivities are larger, and the intensities and the
Yeah,
empathy. So it's people think of giftedness as just one thing. They think of it as IQ, smartness, whatever that means to them.
yeah,
Getting straight A's in school, right? Which, yeah, can happen, but doesn't necessarily. And so, yeah, so these children, if it's not explained to them, how else will they interpret it? They're not like the other kids. The kids don't like them. They don't, they think they have communication problems, when it's just that they're interested in these other things that the kids their age aren't interested in. So the kids, reject them or bully them. And so it is tricky, and they do feel more, and are aware of more. They notice when somebody is, mean to them or ignores them, or,
yeah,
when another child, it might just, they might not even notice, it's just like no big deal. But with gifted kids, everything is often a big deal. And
yeah.
they have big emotions and big emotional responses sometimes, that people will say, how come your kid is so smart, but he's so emotionally immature?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
And I will say, it's not immaturity, it's big sensitivity and big emotions. And you do need to help them contain their emotions and help them understand their emotions and know what to do in these different situations, how to self-soothe. All of those things you teach them
yeah,
those things are important, but there's nothing wrong with them that they have these big reactions and emotions.
yeah. And what is a way you're saying, there are ways that we can help them like manage their big emotions? What are
Mhm.
things as parents or teachers that you could do to help your child basically cope
Mhm.
with the things that they're experiencing?
Well, the one idea of explaining what is wrong,
Yeah,
why they're unhappy in the classroom and what's different about them, explaining giftedness to them, really. So that's
hmm,
one piece. Um, and then the other one, I'll give you an example. I worked with a family, um, with an 8-year-old boy who was exploding in the classroom.
yeah,
And it was because he was so frustrated. He was highly creative, very energetic,
hmm.
loved learning. And he had to sit in his seat in the classroom for these so many hours,
That's my
you know,
son. Yeah,
not right. So being so understimulated, doing work that he already knew. And so he would explode some of the time, or he would be teased by the other kids.
yeah, because they think it's funny when they
Yeah,
trigger him. Yeah,
right. He would cry. I mean, these kids would, right. And boys don't cry. I mean, it's just the pressure on boys and girls too, but an emotional boy, I think there's even more pressure on a
yeah,
male. So this was the thing I taught him and his parents. So I said, it's like, first of all, saying that having big emotions, having feelings, makes you just a richer person. You are have all these complicated, deep feelings, and that's wonderful. And there are places where you won't be safe showing those emotions, where people won't understand them. Or if you're frustrated, you can't just act out and start throwing things, in a classroom. That's not helpful. Okay. So imagine a container where when you are in school or when you are someplace where it's not safe to just be totally you, where you can put your feelings into the container and let them stay there till you get home, where you can let them out, because we love all those feelings. And you can be sad and you can be angry and frustrated, and it's okay. But in school, you want to put them in the container, so that you're not going to get teased and you won't be misunderstood.
I love that one.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, when I've done this with gifted children, right, I might think of put them in the closet or put them in a box, right? But of course, these gifted kids come up with these amazing, analogies. So this one boy described, he said, I'll put them in a coconut.
I love that one.
Yes. Well, this is not the end of the story. So he said, I'm going to put my feelings in a coconut. I had, okay. So, and then he said, I'll reinforce the coconut with diamonds to hold these big feelings in. So he did that. I didn't hear from the family after that. It sounded like things were going really well, and that fixed it. But then some months later, I heard from the family again, and they said he had another meltdown in class. So I just came back and I said, so what, maybe we need to readjust the container. So immediately he said, yes, he said, I'm going to make it as big as a truck, and that did it. In other words, he had such big feelings. A small coconut, wasn't enough to contain them. So you make the coconut as large as a truck, you reinforce it with diamonds. And I didn't hear from the family after that. So I assumed that maybe that worked, and just helping the parents understand and appreciate his emotions and not pathologize him because he had these feelings that they did something wrong as parents, or there was something wrong with him, that he had some kind of disability. No, he just was gifted, and gifted people have big feelings and big emotions. So that was one of the things that I did.
I'm definitely going to try this one as well and see what my son comes up with as a container. And I love, his emotions, because like you said, it's got two sides to the story. Like the medal's got two sides, because you can be angry and you can be sad, but I also, I haven't seen anyone in my life as cheerful and happy and grateful as he is as well. So it's got so much more than just a negative side to it. Like all his emotions are just wonderful. Wonderful.
And the other thing I tell parents is that that in the big emotion, when they are like melting down, you don't talk to them at that point and try to analyze it, explain it, right?
You just won't reach them.
Yes, it won't reach them. So you just are with them in the emotion, and then when they're calmer, when they settle down, then you have the conversation, and then you listen to them. That deep listening, active listening. So I see that you were really frustrated by that, or you got really angry in that moment when blah, blah, blah happened, and tell me about that. What was that about? And you listen carefully to them, and then they help you problem solve. They can, you can say, so what can we do about that? If that happens again, what would be a way you could resolve it so that you don't have a big meltdown? So they're great at problem solving too. Not when they're in the emotion, but later, when the big meltdown is over. So that's another thing.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about that as well is that you don't judge them. You just talk about what happened and try and find a solution together, but you don't judge what has happened. So I love that about this as well. Because if they feel they probably already feel guilty as it is. So,
Mm-hmm.
know,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. They have a strong sense of responsibility too, right?
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Um, yeah, and something else which was actually like before we started recording this podcast, I already told you about some of the things that I was going through with my health during the past few months. Um, and one of the things that I've been that was like a huge topic for me during these past few months was spirituality. Because, when I was growing up, I always felt like I, I didn't belong anywhere, and I thought I was too much, and I really felt different. And um, but there was also something else, and that is something that I'm trying to explain in podcast right now as well, is that I also felt different, not because of the way that my brain worked, but I also felt different because I thought I was experiencing the world and the universe and everything around me in a way that was different from everyone else. And I was actually lucky enough to be in a family where that was okay, because my grandmother, she grew up in Indonesia, and it was just, you know, the spiritual part of her was just as true as whatever we had, like here on earth. So that was all right, but I always knew that I was different. Like um, um, there was something different about me that other people didn't have, and that I should not talk about, because if I would talk about it, people would think I was crazy. And actually, during these past few months, because I was going through chemo and getting better because I had cancer, um, it made me get back in touch with that side of myself as well, because it makes you realize, why am I here? What's my purpose here on earth? And it makes you experience those deep emotions. Um, and one of the questions I was asking myself, because I was talking about it a lot with like some of my butterfly people, so the gifted people that were around me, and a lot of those people said, um, yeah, that's something that I experience as well, but I've never spoken about it with anyone. You're the first one I'm telling. You're the first one I'm telling this to. Um, and it wasn't just one person. It was like almost every gifted person I was talking to was experiencing also that spiritual connection as well. Um, is this something that you also see more often in gifted people? And do you feel like there could be a connection between their giftedness and the way they experience the the world and spirituality, and the connection they feel with the universe, nature, and things like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very much so. I would say, I don't know, probably 99% of the gifted people that I run into, that I work with, that I consult with.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. They have, it's often an intuitive spiritual depth,
Yeah.
a connection to something bigger in the universe, whether it's they go out into nature and they feel, sacred,
The energy.
sanctuary, right, in nature and
Yeah.
energy. They feel they may have guides. They may feel like they have spiritual guides with them. They may talk to them. They may, you know, um, channel information through guidance, through some larger source. They have, yeah. And it's not religious. It's often, they don't relate to a particular dogmatic religion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more an open spiritual sense of something larger, and tapping into it, getting their intuitive information from a larger source and being
Exactly.
supported by it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to my son about that. And, sometimes he just knows things. And I'm like, how do you know that? And he's like, Mommy, it just pops.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
it's like he's tuning into something, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I had as well. I was actually talking to people, and we had this amazing example that I was reading a book, and it was a book which really made me emotional because it was about Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading this book, and in this book, they wrote that the people who gave up when they were in Auschwitz, they called them Muslim men, because they looked like Muslims praying to Mecca, because they were all like
Mm.
just down on their knees, just like they had given up. And the people who would die within the next 2 days, that's the name that they would give to those people. And that really got to me. Like I felt like, I felt all the energy, like I couldn't breathe. And my son was sitting like 3 meters away from me, so there's no way that he could even know, because I was using an e-reader, he could even know which book I was reading, and he couldn't see it. And then he was 3 meters away, and he said muscle man, like the
Mm.
the
Wow.
words that was actually in my book. And I was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
looking at him. I'm like, what? And I was showing it to my husband, like, you won't believe this. Just see
Mhm.
what happened. And that's just one example, but there's like lots of those amazing examples that other people tell me as well. And it makes me, actually, in a way, it also makes me feel safe, because you realize that all is energy.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful.
So yes, so know that people feel crazy, because they might even be, hearing voices kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
There is a mental illness. There's a thing called schizophrenia that does exist, that is problematic, but there are highly intuitive spiritual people who have these abilities to see things and know things.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot in my rainforest minded community of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you feel like that's something that we should actually, make a topic for discussion more often? Because I feel you've got like this thing called gifted trauma, because people, they don't know that they're gifted. They feel lonely. They feel different to everyone else, and because of that, um, they have like this gifted trauma. But then they read about giftedness, but you hardly ever read about this part of giftedness as well. So people still feel like they
Mm-hmm.
don't always belong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we should talk more about it. I think that I'd have to look back at my first book to see. I know I have a chapter on creativity and
Yeah,
spirituality, but again, it's just a little chapter and I don't really go into a lot of depth around it. And I think it would be very
exactly.
useful,
It's not
right?
even in it's not even in my own book.
Mm.
It's just something that, afterwards, after I was talking to all these people, I'm like, well, this could actually be in there, because it's not just me. It's like other people are experiencing the same thing. And it's amazing that you can share that with people as well, just to make sure that people think, that, they have a tribe. They're not crazy. This is something that actually happens
Yes.
more often.
And it's
Yeah.
something really important to develop. I mean, imagine that, right? If this quality was used and developed and could be spread, and maybe this would be a way to influence more people and to heal more of the planet by using those abilities, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah. And we've already spoken about like that part of gifted trauma, and the feeling different to everyone else. And here in the Netherlands, there's often a discussion, like even when parents know that their kids are gifted because they've taken the test and they've got this report and it says, your child is gifted. And there's a lot of parents that I talk to who just don't tell their children because, they feel like, no, I just don't want my child to feel different. And I'm like, well, but he or she probably already does.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like it's important for parents to talk about this with children as well, just to help them understand?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yes. Yes. Um, I think people are afraid that their kids will become arrogant or
Yeah,
something, or, and that I don't see that happening. I see more often what you're describing. It's that something's wrong with me. I
yeah,
don't fit
exactly.
in. I'm not, something's wrong. And, so yeah, and explaining it in a way that isn't like, oh, you're so much better than everybody else. Right. But these parents, I don't run into parents who do that. There may be some out there who do, some insecure people who have to build themselves up by saying how smart they are.
Yeah,
But, gifted people often know how much they don't know and kind of resist the label because they know other people who are much smarter than they are. So they're
yeah,
probably not gifted, they're all of those things. So, absolutely. I think there are ways to explain it. It's not easy, and you can use the analogy if that works,
yeah,
and people have different strength, or the idea of people have different strengths and people have different weaknesses, and these are where your strengths are, and this is why you feel like something's wrong with you, because you think differently, or you think faster, or you learn faster, or you have these sensitivities.
yeah,
And just even you really don't even need to use the word gifted. You can explain it by being specific. In fact, that could be, you could say people use the word gifted, and it describes this. And then you say, these are your abilities. These are your strengths. You learn faster. You have big feelings, and just describe it more specifically. I think parents should do that, and
yeah.
maybe read, for kids who are a little older, read parts of my blog to the kids, or have them read the blog, and then they just see where they fit. They see they do have a clan, they do have people who are like them.
Exactly. And that's so important, just to know that there's nothing wrong with you. And, it actually took my son over a year. And then he's like, he was just embracing it. And not that he was, like you said, he was not feeling better than anyone else. He was just loving the fact that he was different and he could embrace the intense way in which he was experiencing the world, basically. And that made such a lot of difference because, before that, he basically just didn't want to be here anymore. And, by explaining it to him, and not just because some people, they just tend to just explain that, the IQ, and that they're fast learners and everything, but especially the intensity and everything that was, surrounded with that, and the thinking differently than other people, that basically ticked some boxes for him, saying, I'm not weird. This is
Mm-hmm.
just another way of being. It's not better, but it's not worse. It's just
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you use the overexcitabilities
Yes.
as a part of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually, because at first, when he was at home, I didn't even know about the overexcitabilities. I just Googled what I thought my son was like. And then all of a sudden, I got like on the website of the Browski and the overexcitabilities. And I was like reading it, and I was like showing it to my husband, like, look at this, there's nothing wrong with him. This is this this just describes what he's like. And and we were going through that, and actually I would just print everything out because it was just a website which was explaining all the different overexcitabilities and also how they could manifest. And I was just going over that with my son, and he would have a marker and he was like, yes, this I recognize, this I recognize, yes, this is me. And at the end, he's like, okay, yes, mommy, if I would have to rate my overexcitabilities, this one would be a 9, this one would be an 8, this one would be a 10. And all of a sudden he could appreciate himself and like feel also feel that the power that they could have, like it's not just something bad, it's also something that, you know, could be really like something wonderful, the way that you're in the intense way you're experiencing the world. So yeah, that we definitely used that as well, and that was a real eye opener, not just for me, but also for all of us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Here, so that
Mm-hmm.
was amazing. And then after that, I remember I got like Christine Fonseca's book about emotional intensity in gifted students, and that also answered so many questions. And that was just the beginning of our journey, like discovering ourselves and just realizing, no, there's nothing wrong with us. And then I was just reading book after book, and I was asking like I was asking people, which books should I read? And then they were recommending your book as well. And I'm like, yes, this all brings it together. This is what makes it so beautiful and so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And you saw it in yourself as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the other thing. Parents, it would help parents to understand that it's part of them too.
Exactly.
And
And it
right.
actually also helped going through this journey together,
Mm.
because it would make he would see things in me as well. And
Mm-hmm.
if I thought that that was okay, then it was okay for him to embrace himself as well. So it was, it was a journey that we basically made together, and it was really, really beautiful because I knew I was gifted, but they had never explained to me what being gifted actually was. I just thought I was, you know, smart and a fast learner. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
never knew that, it would mean so many other things. So yeah, that journey, that was amazing. Just knowing everything about myself and also about my son. And um, it helped me find the people that make my life so colorful right now as well. So that's amazing. Um, and one of the other things that you said when we were talking about the word giftedness, you said, it's difficult for a lot of people to use that word giftedness because they can always point out someone who is smarter than them, or a fast learner, or no, they're not gifted because they're not good at mathematics. It's really hard to think about yourself as being gifted, and it's like there's like this monster on your shoulder who's it's like, every time you're like, oh, could I be, there's then they could always give you a comment. No, 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 just be normal because you're not, because um the people you work with are so much smarter than you. Um and then later on, I read one of your blogs about imposter syndrome as well. And I had this webinar from Metsa Kresge as well about imposter syndrome. And I was like, yes, yes. um, what would you say to people who are trying to embrace the way that they are, trying to embrace their rainforest mind, but every time they try and do that, it's like there's an inner voice telling them that they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, that other people
Mm-hmm.
are smarter than them, and that they're just imposters and they shouldn't talk about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing is that that's very common,
that. Hmm.
that it's more common than not that the gifted person will have a lot of self-doubt, know how much they don't know people who are high achievers,
Yeah.
that again, it's the mythology. They didn't do well in school. They didn't get good grades, let's say. Um, they didn't do the homework because they were, disillusioned. And, they don't, some of them don't test well because they can overthink the test. They can figure
Yes.
out which, all the answers on the multiple choice test could be correct because they, they can come up with a reason because they see how everything is connected to everything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So explaining all of those things to them, and then, explaining that imposter syndrome is part of it. And, the sense of being, some of it is, you don't want to necessarily say you're gifted because that would mean you have a responsibility. That would mean, what do I have to do now? What's the pressure to be a high achiever or make a difference or change the world? And
Yeah.
I'm just a mom, or, it's like, yeah. So there are lots of levels to it, and the other thing that popped into my mind as you were talking was that if somebody has experienced trauma in childhood,
Hmm.
that's not just being gifted, but they were abused as kids, they grew up in an
Yeah.
alcoholic family, then that's a whole other level
That was
of,
me, but outside of the family.
yeah. So that complicates matters, where you're going to have an inner critic. You're going to be extra self-doubting. You are going to blame yourself for, let's say, the trauma that happened in the family. There's a whole other level of experience there that, being a therapist, right? My
Yeah.
advice is then you go get therapy for the trauma that you experienced. And so the umbrella, is sort of like you're gifted and you're highly sensitive, and you have all these characteristics, and you've got a whole, underneath it all, there's trauma that needs to be seen and addressed and held and healed.
Yeah.
There's a wounding that happens from that. And one of your questions, I think, was, is it worse when you're gifted in a family
Yeah.
where there's trauma? And my answer, is like, it's kind of both. You're a highly sensitive child in the family, so you see more and you feel more, and you're more aware of what's going on, and you're affected because you have all this empathy and sensitivity. At the same time, in my clients who have been horribly abused, they've been resilient as well.
Yes.
They don't become abusers. They don't become, serious meth addicts or something, like, or, serial killers, or, it's like there's some kind of resilience. And I think it may go back to the spirituality, or there's something deep inside them that doesn't get broken.
I love
That,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I've said this to some of my clients because it takes a lot of therapy for them to come to self-acceptance and self-love. But they're living lives they're good people. They're loving. They're even maybe accomplished in a career. They may have good relationships, but there's this huge self-doubt and self-criticism and self-hatred often
Hmm.
that comes from growing up in abuse. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that needs to be done to heal that. But what I see in these clients is, I see it's like a, what I want to say, like a crystal cord inside them, in their center,
Yeah.
that no one could break. And it's like, that's what keeps them from, keeps them whole, keeps them from really uh becoming, repeating the patterns of, let's say, abuse. And it's like, nobody could break that, nobody could touch that in
Yeah.
you. And so that's sometimes the difference, I think, in what our gifted people can let's say survive in a family where there's all this
Yeah.
abuse and trauma.
I love that, the way that you're explaining that as well, because one of the things, again, it like in all the conversations I'm having, it all comes together, like the being gifted, the intense way you experience things, the trauma and the spirituality, it all comes together in all of the questions that all of the conversations that I'm having. And one of the things that I've also been experiencing, like you said, like there's something there that makes sure that you don't break and you don't hurt other people. But I felt like that also, in a way, came at a price as well. And during the past few months, I finally felt like it was safe enough to have like that little child inside of me who's been going through all these horrible things. She could come back and I could embrace her, and it feels like it's just I've I've found a piece of myself again. And that is also for me, it's very much linked to that spirituality, like finding myself again. And like she was the key to making that connection like fully. And I think that's really, really beautiful. So thank you for addressing this as well, because I think it's really important.
Yes. And that's exactly the way I work with clients. Is one of the pieces of work is finding that child, finding the wounded child inside yourself and coming to reparent her, coming to give her the love she didn't get and help her understand, what's, I'm trying to find the words, it's like, what happened to her was not her fault.
Exactly. And you can heal her.
Yes.
As
right.
an adult, now that you're safe, you can give her the love and heal her like she
That's
just didn't get. So you have that power inside of you as well to heal a part of yourself and move on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Especially having the support of a practitioner, a therapist, or a body worker, or somebody who understands that, so that you're not alone doing it, that you don't have to do it on your own, but you ultimately reparent that inner child.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And you can heal that for sure. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, well, we've been talking for about an hour now, so I think I'm going to have to let you go, which is a shame because I could have talked for hours, but I'm sure you've got lots of other things to do as well. Is there anything you would still like to say to the people listening today that want to discover or are in the process of discovering their rainforest mind?
I think I would say that it's never too late, that you're never too old, that don't give up, and that if you are a parent, it is really helpful to your child to understand yourself and to do the work on yourself and to read the books about giftedness and relate them to yourself.
Yes.
So that you understand who you are, and that will benefit your children. And it's never too late to do that, and then to find more of what is your purpose on the planet. What are you here to do?
That actually reminds me of one of the last posts you put on Instagram. It said, what did it say? Like, it's my calling to help you find your calling, your raison d'être. And there's no better time than now. Like you say, it's never too late to find yourself and to find your purpose here on earth as well. Yeah,
that's right. And I use myself as an example. I was in education, and I went back and got a counseling degree, and when I was 40, in my 40s, And then I didn't start the blog until my 60s.
Yes.
So I tell people, these are my most productive years. And I've been in my 60s doing this blogging and writing the books. And
exactly.
So you're never too old.
Exactly. And I love that as well, because, at first, because, like I said, I used to be a project manager and a product manager, but now that I've been ill, I'm like, I want to do something that makes more of a difference in the world. So maybe I want to help other gifted adults and help parents who are struggling, just to go through that journey and to make sure that they see it as a gift, instead of hating the word gifted because it doesn't feel like it, that they can start to embrace it and see it as a gift as well. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, oh, you're 42, why are you just going to change everything you do, and you will have to go back to school? And because if you're going to do this, you should at least know what you're talking about. And right now I'm just discovering everything and reading it and studying all the time, and it makes me feel so alive. That I'm finally doing something that makes a difference, and hopefully later on I can even help more people than I do now with the podcast and with my book and the parent groups and everything that I'm doing right now, because this it makes such a difference to be doing something that you feel could be your purpose on this earth. So thank you for being such an inspiration in that respect as well.
You're so welcome. It's my great pleasure. I'm happy to be there. And there's a huge need for what you're describing, for the work that you're thinking about doing now, or that you are doing now. There's a big need around the world for people who understand this.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mocht je na het luisteren van deze podcast nog meer informatie willen over dit onderwerp, mijn boek Een Intense Reis is te koop via uitgeverij SWP, swpboek.com/2349 of de online of lokale boekwinkel. Ook kun je voor meer informatie altijd terecht op www.eenintensereis.nl.